On Christmas Eve, I slid an envelope across the table to my son. He opened it, looked at the number inside, and said, "The best gift you could give this family is to just stop existing." Nobody at that table took it back, so I did what he asked. I spent the next 4 days doing things he would not discover until I was already gone. Then I drove out before sunrise with one suitcase and my headlights off. What I left behind on that mantel took away the one thing they had been counting on. Welcome to bitter autumn. I'm grateful you chose to spend this time with me. Before the story continues, comment your country or city below. Let's see who's listening tonight. Please note, parts of this story are fictional, shaped for entertainment and educational purposes. Any resemblance to actual names or settings is coincidental, but the message still matters. On the last Christmas Eve I ever spent under that roof, the snow came down over Ashford slow and patient, like it had nowhere better to be. It gathered on the sills of 118 Birch Lane and crowded the dark glass until the tree lights seemed to be burning somewhere out in the yard. The fire worked low in the grate. The roast sat half-eaten between us, going cool the good plates out because it was a holiday, and holidays were when we still pretended. I had built the table we ate at, built the cabinets behind me, the frames around every door. 43 years of that work were in my hands, and my hands knew it, the way they ached in the cold now that I was 68 and done with the trade. I gripped my knife a little too hard and made myself set it down. Through the doorway on the living room mantel, Nora's crystal music box caught the light. It had not been wound in a long while. I did not need to hear it to hear it. They were all there. Nate at the far side of the table, 41 years old, and a phone in his hand, the way another man might hold a cigarette, a thing he could not put down. 16 years he had sold whatever they told him to sell across 3 counties, and it had taught him to look at people like inventory. Rachel beside him with her arms folded, even while she ate, her voice when she used it, clipped down to the fewest words. Mason at the end, 16 earbuds in, a screen tilted where his plate should have been. And Lily, 12 years old, her sketchbook beside her fork, the way some children keep a napkin, watching all of us, the way she watched everything, careful and quiet, missing nothing. I had something for them. I had spent the afternoon on it. I remembered the desk. Earlier that day, the lamp on the checkbook opened my pen, moving the way it had moved over 1,000 invoices. I wrote the date. I wrote the name. Then I came to the figure, and my pen stopped on the second number, the way a saw stops when it finds a nail. 13,400. My hand sat there a moment, not writing, not lifting an old ache, pressing up under the words. Then I finished it, blotted it, folded it into the envelope, and told myself it was a gift and only a gift. Now the envelope was in my shirt pocket. I took it out. I slid it across the cloth past the gravy boat until it touched the edge of Nate's plate. "Merry Christmas, son," I said. "I put a little something together for you and Rachel." Nate did not look up right away. He finished whatever he was reading, thumb moving, then set the phone face down like he was doing me a favor. He opened the envelope with one finger. He looked at the check. 13,400. He said the number flat, no lift at the end, no weight, like it meant nothing to him at all. That's supposed to fix anything. The fire snapped. Rachel pushed a piece of roast to the far edge of her plate and left it there. "I thought it might give you two some breathing room," I said. "Breathing room." He almost laughed, and there was nothing in it. He set the check down on the cloth and looked at me, and his face went to that flat, cold place I had started seeing more and more. "Honestly, Dad, the best gift you could give this family is to just stop existing." Across the table, Lily's fork went still. Nobody moved to take it back. Rachel studied her plate. Mason's head stayed bent over his screen, one earbud glowing. The tree lights kept blinking in the black window. The snow kept coming down, patient as ever, filling the yard, filling the street, filling the whole quiet town like it meant to bury it soft. I have been hurt in my life. I once caught my hand in a jointer and drove myself to the county seat with a shop rag wound tight around it. I buried Nora on a gray day 9 years back and drove home to an empty house and did not fall apart until the truck was in the drive. I knew what pain was, the loud kind and the slow kind. This was the slow kind. It did not shout. It moved in under the noise of the fire and settled somewhere I could not reach. I looked at my son, 41 years old, a boy I had taught to ride a bike on the sidewalk out front, and I understood that he had said the number out loud, and it had not touched him. He did not know it. He looked right at $13,400 and felt nothing, and that was its own kind of answer, though I could not have told you yet to what. Lily was watching me. Only Lily. Her eyes had come up off the sketchbook and found my face, and there was a question in them a child that age should not have to ask. I did not want her to see me fold. So I did what my hands always did when the rest of me could not hold. I reached down without a word and found the back of my chair, the curved rail I had sanded smooth myself years ago, and I held it the way you hold a rail on a bad set of stairs. My knuckles went white and nobody noticed but the girl. I set down my fork, and behind my ribs something old and tired went very, very still. I left the table before my hands could shake and walked into the one room in that house that had always been mine. The kitchen. Bright and hard, lit the overhead bulb, throwing everything flat and honest. Dishes stacked in the sink from a dinner nobody had finished. Beyond the window over the faucet, snow was gathering on the sill, in a slow, patient line filling the corner of the glass, the way it had every winter I had lived here. Behind me, the noise of the dining room dropped away as the door swung shut, the low voices and the scrape of chairs going muffled and far. And for one breath, it was only me and the running cold of the tap I turned on so my hands would have something to do. I heard the door before I heard him. Nate came in the way he came into every room now, phone still glowing in his palm, thumb moving even as he stopped. He did not look sorry. That was the first thing I understood. A man who has followed you to finish a fight does not wear the face of a man who wants to take it back. You walked out, he said. I came in here. I shut off the water. There is a difference. He set the phone face down on the counter, which for him was a kind of ceremony, and he leaned back against the cabinets. I had hung myself, and he looked at me with that flat, cold face I was only starting to learn. You have kept us on a leash our whole lives, Dad, he said. The word landed strange in that small room. A leash. I dried my hands slowly on the towel by the stove and made myself look at him while I did it. A leash, I said. I put the roof over the heads of your children, and you never once let us forget it. He said it fast, like it had been waiting behind his teeth for a long time. Every check, every repair, every time Mason needed something, or Lily needed something, there you were quiet about it. So quiet, and we were supposed to be grateful. You made a debt out of every good thing you ever did. I have worked wood for 43 years. I know the sound of something splitting along a grain that was hidden until it opened. That was the sound I heard then, not in the walls in him. 16 years. 16 years since I brought this family under one roof and carried what needed carrying, and he had been keeping a ledger the whole time, and every entry in it was against me. I never asked you for a thing, I said. You didn't have to. He gave a short laugh with no warmth in it at all. That was the whole trick of it. I could have raised my voice. My father raised his, and I swore off it young, and I have kept that vow through worse nights than this one. So I kept it low. Say the real thing, Nate, I told him. You did not follow me in here about gratitude. For a second, he looked almost relieved, like a man setting down a weight he was tired of pretending was light. And that was when the doorway filled behind him. Rachel. Arms folded across her front the way she always folded them, that clipped practical set to her mouth. Her eyes going over the kitchen and landing on me without a single degree of heat in them. She had been listening. She had been waiting for her line. We want to sell Ray, she said. We cannot because everything is in your name. There it was, laid on my own counter like a bill. I looked from her to him. So that is what tonight was really about. Somewhere warm, Rachel went on as if I had asked for the brochure. Away from the snow, away from this town, a place that is ours. We have talked about it for years, and every time it comes back to the same wall. The house, the accounts, all of it, your name. She said the word name the way another person might say a lock they had been trying keys against for a long time. This is a family home, I said. It is an asset, she answered, and did not blink. That hurt worse than the shouting would have. Nate at least had heat in him, old and curdled and mean, but heat. Rachel said it like a woman reading a number off a chart, and I understood that whatever this was, it was not a fight that had started tonight. It had been settling under the floorboards of every dinner, every holiday, every quiet favor for 16 years, and I had walked over it and called it love. You raised me in this house, Nate said. He had picked the phone back up without seeming to know he had done it. You will leave it to me anyway. When you are gone, it is ours regardless. So tell me why we are all standing here pretending. Why not now? Why not just move it now and stop making everyone wait on you to die? The tap dripped once into the steel sink. The snow kept building on the sill. I looked at my son, 41 years old, leaning on my cabinets in the bright, hard light, a boy I had taught to ride a bike on the sidewalk out front. A boy who used to stand at my workbench and hand me tools one at a time, chisel, then mallet, then the flat pencil from behind his own ear. I looked for that boy in the face across from me, the way you reach into a familiar drawer without looking. And for the first time in 41 years, my hand closed on nothing. He was not there. I could not find him. Sleep never came that night. I sat in the dark with an old leather album and let every photograph accuse me. The bedroom held only the sounds a house makes when it thinks no one is listening. The furnace ticking somewhere below, the wind pressing at the glass. I had come up the stairs, slow, one hand on the rail, my knee stiff from the cold, the way it always went stiff in December, and I had not turned on the overhead light. Just the lamp on the nightstand, turned low, the shade throwing a small brown circle over the bedspread. The rocking chair by the window still sat where Nora had left it 9 years ago. I lowered myself into it and set the album on my knees. Beyond the glass, the town lay frozen and blue. Ashford, at 3 a.m, is a photograph of itself, roofs banked with snow, street lamps, standing in their own small halos, not a single car on Birch Lane. I could hear the family below me settling a door, closing water in a pipe, and then nothing. I opened the cover. The first page held our wedding. 1981, the winter we married in the church on Maple with the heater broken, and Nora in a borrowed coat over her dress, because the sanctuary was so cold, you could see your own breath. In the photograph, she is not looking at the camera. She is looking up, laughing, because the snow had started to come down through a gap in the old roof and land in her hair, and she thought that was the finest joke God ever told. I remembered standing beside her with my collar too tight, 26 years old, certain I had already used up all the luck a man was allotted in one life. I turned the page. There he was, Nate at 5, swallowed whole by my workshop apron, the strings wound twice around his middle and still trailing to the floor. He had insisted on wearing it. He had stood at my bench and handed me my tools in the order he thought they came, getting every one of them wrong and calling himself the helper in a voice that dared anyone to argue. I could still smell that shop in the memory of it. Cut pine and machine oil and the sawdust that got into everything, into your cuffs, into your supper, into the creases of a boy's laughing face. Nora had come to the door of the shop that afternoon with 2 cups of coffee and stood watching us a long while. "Look at him, Ray," she said. "He wants to be just like you." "He has got good hands," I said. She did not answer right away. She set my cup down on the bench where I would knock it over within the hour the way I always did, and she watched her son line up the chisels, smallest to largest, with a seriousness that no 5-year-old should own. "He has got your heart," she said. "Do not let the world teach him to waste it." I had laughed then. I was not laughing now. I turned more pages, and the years turned with them. A summer picture caught the 3 of us on a porch that was not this porch, a rented place 2 towns over before I ever saw the lot on Birch Lane. Nate is a gap-toothed boy on the top step. Nora has her hand flat on his hair. I am behind them both with a hammer still hanging from my belt, because I could not sit down at a house, even a borrowed one, without fixing something on it. We did not own a single board of that place. We looked, in that square of light, like people who owned the whole world. I stopped turning and let the album rest. I am not a man who keeps accounts of what he gives. That was always Nora's gentle complaint about me and her quiet pride in me at the same time. But sitting there in the low lamp, I found myself counting anyway, and once I began, I could not stop. The years, the checks that were never asked to come back. The roof I climbed at 60, the tuition I quietly covered, the winters I paid to heat rooms I was not welcome in. I counted it the way you count stairs in the dark, waiting for the one that is not there, and I could not find the step where kindness had turned into a rope. There was no single night it happened. It happened the way rot happens in good wood, from the inside, silent until the day you lean your weight on it and it gives. Do not let it become a rope other people can pull you by. She had said that too once in her mild, and I had waved it off like smoke. The photograph of Nora stood on the nightstand in its plain frame, the same one that had stood there every morning of 9 years. I set the album aside and lifted it into the lamplight. Her music box was down on the mantel, where it had always been closed silent, and I did not go down for it. I only needed her face. "I tried, love," I said. I really did. I waited for the grief to come up my throat the way it always did when I spoke to her out loud. It did not. What came instead was a thing so plain I almost did not recognize it, a loosening behind the ribs, a quiet in the chest. Relief. As if a weight I had carried so long I had mistaken it for my own body had shifted just slightly and let me breathe. I set her back on the nightstand, and I did not make a plan. I made one small decision, and it was this. I would stop being invisible in my own house. When the first gray light touched the window, the tired man in the glass was sitting up straighter than he had in years. By Christmas morning, with the house still sleeping off its cruelty, I went looking for answers where I never used to look. The kitchen was cold, in the way old kitchens get, before anyone opens a curtain. I put the coffee on because my hands wanted something to do, and then I forgot it, and it went cold in the pot while I stood there. Snow had come in the night. It sat on the sill in a clean gray line. Somewhere above me the house held its sleepers, and I listened to make sure none of them stirred. No footsteps. No phone buzzing on a nightstand. For the first time in a long time, the house was mine alone, and I meant to use the quiet. There is a closet under the stairs where I keep a file box. I had not opened it in years. I carried it to the kitchen table and set it under the hanging lamp, and I wiped the dust off the lid with my palm. The papers inside had gone soft at the corners, the way paper does when it is old and honest. I found the folder for the house near the bottom. The purchase agreement was still stapled, still creased along the same fold. I put on my reading glasses, and I read it the way I should have read it once, slowly, line by line, the way Nora used to read everything before she signed. The contract was from 2008. I remembered the winter I bought it. The trade still good to me, then my hands still fast. What I had not remembered or had let myself stop seeing was the wording. There, in plain type, was a line I must have skimmed 100 times without weighing it. Primary owner, I said to the empty room. Not co-owner, primary. The word landed heavier than it should have. I read on. The deed had my name, and only my name. Nate, Rachel, and the children were listed further down, and the paper described them exactly. Residents with no ownership stake. Not one of them held a share of the house. Not one of them had ever signed a lease because there was no lease. They lived here because I let them live here. That was the whole of it, set down in the language of the law, and it had been true every single day for 16 years while I acted like a guest at my own table. I got a pencil and the back of an envelope, and I started to figure. I am a careful man with a tally. 43 years of billing customers teaches you to add. The mortgage first, all the months. I had carried it after Nate moved his family in, and the payments simply became mine. Then the repairs. The roof in the year the ice dam came. The furnace. The water heater twice. The porch I rebuilt with my own hands and my own lumber. Then the softer money, the kind you never write down because you love people. Tuition help when Mason started at the private school. Braces. The car that broke down and had to be replaced. The emergencies that were always somebody else's emergency and always my check. I added it in columns, and then I added the columns, and I sat back and looked at the number, and the number was roughly $500,000. 16 years. Not $1 of it ever repaid. Not once had anyone offered. I did not feel angry. That surprised me. I felt the way you feel when a fog lifts off a road and you see how close you have been driving to the edge. I left the box open and went out to the front hall because a man who has stopped being invisible starts noticing the small habits of a house. The mail piled on the hall table the way it always did. I never touched it. Nate got to it first. Every day had for years carried it in from the box before anyone else was up, and nobody ever questioned it. It was just a thing Nate did. I had never once asked myself why. I sorted it now. Circulars. A catalog with a snowman on the cover. And under the catalog a glossy sheet, the kind a real estate agent prints. I turned it over into the light. It was a photograph of a porch. My porch. My front door with the brass knocker. Nora picked out and the address printed under it. 118 Birch Lane. That is my porch, I said. That is my front door. I stood there holding it, and my chest had gone very still. Why is there a sales flyer for a house I never listed? Beneath the flyer was an envelope already opened, the flap, torn rough by a thumb. It was from a lender, a bank I did not use, and it was not addressed to me. It was addressed to Nate. Correspondence about my house sent to my son, opened by my son, and slid into a pile I never looked at. And why is my son taking the mail before I see it? I did not have the words yet for what I was seeing. I only knew the shape of it, the way you know a storm by the color of the sky before the first drop falls. Someone had done business about this house, my house, the house the contract said was mine and mine alone, and they had made sure the paper never reached my hands. I turned the lender's envelope over to read the return address one more time to be sure I had it right. And there on the back, in Nate's slanting hand, was a short note in pencil, a few words meant for no one but himself. And I read them twice and understood none of it. That same afternoon, while the others slept off their wine, I sat at the old desk and pressed play on a machine nobody used anymore. The den smelled of dust and cold coffee. Nobody sat in here now. The landline lived on the corner of the desk, and the answering machine beside it had a red light that blinked the way it had blinked for months, unheard, unwanted. I had not checked it since the leaves turned. Upstairs, the house was quiet. Wine does that to people who drink to forget what they said the night before. The furnace hummed somewhere under the floor, steady and low, and the winter light came through the blinds, thin and gray, the color of dishwater. I pressed the button and let it talk. The first message was a pharmacy, reminding me of a prescription I had already picked up. The second was a wrong number, a young woman asking for someone named Dale. The third was the church, something about a coat drive. Old and harmless, all of it. The small noise of a life that keeps moving, whether you listen or not. I almost stopped there. My hand was already reaching for the button. Then the fourth message started, and a man cleared his throat. His voice was smooth and practiced the voice of a person who reads from the same page all day. He did not give his name in a way I could hold on to. He said he was calling from a lender office. He said he was following up on the scheduled appointment about the property. He said it plainly, the property, as if there were only one and everyone knew which. He asked that someone confirm the time. Then he said the thing that stopped my breath in my chest. He said they just needed the paperwork finalized on my end. My end. I sat very still. I had not started any paperwork. I had not signed anything, had not called anyone, had not made any appointment about my house with any lender in the county or out of it. I gripped the back of the chair, the way I do when something in me goes wrong, and I played it again. The same words, smooth, certain. A man who believed the arrangement was already halfway done. I played it a third time, and this time I did not listen to the voice. I listened to what stood behind it. Someone had spoken to that office. Someone had made that appointment. Someone had told a stranger that the paperwork on my house was nearly finished and that someone had not been me. I got up and went to the front hall and came back with the pile I had carried in that morning. I laid it out on the desk in the gray light, one piece at a time, the way I used to lay out a cut list before I touched the saw. The sales flyer for a house I never listed, my own porch, printed glossy and small. The lender's envelope, the flap torn rough, addressed to Nate and not to me. The pencil note on the back in his slanting hand that still meant nothing. And now the voice saying my end, saying the property, saying finalized. 4 things that had nothing to do with each other unless you set them side by side. Set side by side, they were one thing. I did not go up the stairs. I wanted to. There is a version of a man my age who takes the stairs 2 at a time and puts his fist through a bedroom door, and for one long moment, I was close to being him. But shouting wakes a house and warns it, and I had spent 43 years learning that you measure before you cut. You do not cut in anger. You measure. So I picked up the telephone, and I called the one man I trusted with the measure. The line rang twice in the county seat, 1 drive away, and Jerry Mercer answered the way he always answered, like a man who had been expecting the call for 30 years. Jerry, it is Ray. I need an hour of your time tomorrow. There was a pause and I heard him set something down, and I could picture the reading glasses coming off. You sound like a man who found something in a drawer. Several somethings. Legal ones. Then bring it all. His voice dropped into that blunt register I had heard him use for other men, never for me. And Ray, do not sign a single thing until we have talked. I have not signed anything in years. Good. Keep it that way. First thing in the morning. Bring the originals if you have them, not copies. I told him I would. I did not tell him more because I did not have the words yet, and because a thing said out loud on a telephone is a thing you cannot take back. We were old enough, the both of us, to know that. He had held my hand at Nora's funeral. He had never once had to hold it as a client. That was going to change tomorrow, and we both heard it in the quiet before he hung up. I stood alone in the den for a while after that. Then I did the careful thing. I took the flyer and the lender's letter and the old contract from the drawer where I kept it, and I slid all three into a plain folder, and I pressed the folder flat. I did not leave it in the house. I carried it out through the cold and set it under the bench seat of my truck, where 19 years of receipts already lived, where no one in that family ever thought to look. Whatever had been set in motion had begun without me, and I meant to find out how far it had already gone. The morning after Christmas, I drove the long white road out of Ashford, like a man carrying evidence in his chest. The folder sat on the passenger seat where a person would sit. I had brought it in from under the bench at first light, brushed the frost off the plain cover, and set it there beside me so I would not forget the weight of the thing. It did not move. It did not speak. It only rode along patient the way a hard fact rides along whether you look at it or not. The truck was 19 years old, and it knew this road better than I did. The heater worked on one side and quit on the other. So my right hand stayed warm on the wheel, and my left went slow and stiff, and I did not bother to complain about it, because there was no one left in the cab to complain to. Outside, the fields ran flat and white to the tree line. Fence posts came up out of the snow at even spaces, leaning a little, the way old men lean. The light was gray. It was always gray out here in the last week of December. A gray that did not promise anything, not sun and not more snow, just more of itself. I practiced out loud, because I have never trusted a question I have not heard in my own voice first. Jerry, I said to the windshield, I need you to tell me what a man can do when I lost it there. The sentence came apart in my mouth. I tried again from the top and got 2 words further and lost it again. The trouble was that I did not have a plain way to ask what I wanted to ask. I wanted to walk in and set the folder on his desk and say, tell me how bad this is. Tell me how far it has gone. Tell me if I still own the ground I am standing on. But every time I reached for it, the words turned slippery, and I understood that a man does not rehearse a thing he already understands. He rehearses a thing he is afraid to hear answered, so I let the questions go for a mile and let the road have me instead. I knew this stretch. I had driven it my whole grown life to job sites and lumber yards and the county seat and back, and once a long time ago I had taught a boy to drive it. Nate was 16. He sat behind this same wheel or the wheel of the truck, before this one gripping it at the wrong hours, 10 past 4, and I sat where the folder sat now. 10 and 2, son, I told him. Ease off the brake. I eased off it like the pedal might bite him. The truck lurched. He caught it. He hated that I was watching, and he told me so. I have got it, Dad. Stop hovering. I remember the flat annoyance in it, the way a boy hands his father the first small proof that he means to leave. I had laughed it off then. I did not laugh now. I sat with the ugly arithmetic of it in the cold cab, and the arithmetic came out plain. I had always been hovering, had I not. 41 years, I had called it helping. 41 years of showing up with a truck and a checkbook and two scarred hands, of fixing what did not need fixing, of standing a half step too close in case the boy fell. I had never once made him carry his own weight because carrying it for him had felt like love, and I had never learned the difference. Maybe there was no difference to learn. Or maybe there was, and I had spent a life on the wrong side of it, and now a man who had learned everything he knew behind this wheel from me had looked me in the eye across a table and told me to stop existing. The cold pressed at the bad side of the glass, and I noticed a thing I had spent 68 years not letting myself notice. The cold of Ashford had never felt like weather to me. It felt like walls. It felt like a room with the door shut, a white room I had been born inside and had mistaken for the whole world, and I had built a life against its walls and called that a home. My father had died in that cold. I had assumed I would too. Not anymore, I said. My own voice surprised me in the quiet. I did not know yet where that sentence was going. I only knew it was true. Then Nora came to me the way she still did, uninvited and welcome. Not her face, her sound. That one slow waltz from the music box on the mantel. The tune she used to hum under her breath while she graded her students' scales at the kitchen table, off by a note here and there and never caring. I found I was humming it. My left hand had stopped aching. My hands, both of them, had gone quiet and steady on the wheel, the way they used to go steady before I set a blade to good wood. Never again, I said. The road bent, and the skyline of the county seat came up out of the snow ahead of me, low brick, and a white church spire, and the flat roof of the building where Jerry had kept his office for 34 years. My grip tightened. For one breath, I wanted to drive around it, past it, out to wherever the road went after that. Instead, I drove straight at it. Straight at the truth of the thing, and not around it for the first time in my life. I parked. I picked up the folder. And when I looked up, Jerry was standing in the doorway, waiting for me, wearing a look I had never once seen on his face in 30 years. Jerry read for a long time before he set down his glasses, and lawyers do not set down their glasses for good news. He read the way a man reads a bill he already knows the size of. His office was small and warm, the radiator ticking in the corner, like a slow clock, and the window behind him held nothing but flat gray sky. My folder was open across his desk. Between us lay everything I had carried out of my own house. He said the friend part first, because he is an honest man. Rayton, he said, I have known you 30 years. Today I am your lawyer, not your friend. Those two are about to want different things, and I need you to hear the lawyer. I hear you, I said. He pulled the first document toward him. The purchase contract from 2008, the paper I had signed at a folding table in this same county seat when my hands were steadier and my son still called on Sundays. Jerry turned it so I could see, though I did not need to. I knew what it said. This is the deed, and this is the recorded contract behind it, he said. One name. Primary owner Raymond Callahan. There is no second name anywhere on it. And Nate, your son, his wife, the two kids, they live there. That is all the paper says they do. He tapped the line with one blunt finger. Resident with no ownership stake. No lease, no rent, nothing that gives them a claim. Legally, this house is yours. All of it. I sat with that. I had bought the place for them as much as for me. 16 years I had covered what needed covering, and I had never once made either of us sign a thing about it, because you do not paper a gift to your own child. I had thought that was love. Jerry read my face. You did not have to give them a nickel of the last 16 years, he said quietly. You know that. But this is not about what you gave. This is about this. He set the contract aside. Then he did the thing I would remember. He took the second document, held it a moment, as if it were hot, and turned it around to face me. It was a refinance application. My name was at the bottom of it. My signature, the long tail on the R. I had made the same way since I was a boy. Except I had never made it on this page. I had never seen this page. Read it, Jerry said. Take your time. I read it. A refinance application filed against 118 Birch Lane. Beside it in the folder sat the two things that had first stopped my breath in the front hall. The morning before, a listing flyer of my own house, glossy priced, and a lender letter. And the lender letter was addressed to Nathan Callahan. My left hand found the back of the chair and gripped it. The cold in the joint came up hard. That is not my signature, I said. My voice did not rise. It has never risen. But it went flat and far away like a voice heard through a wall. I know it is not, Jerry said. I have 3 of your real ones in my files. This is close. It is not yours. He put his glasses back on, then took them off again, which told me the worst of it was still coming. Ray, I am going to name this the way a court would name it, because you need the true words and not the soft ones. Somebody signed your name on a legal document without your leave. That is forgery. And filing that document with a lender to pull money against your house, that is mortgage fraud. That is a felony. Prison, not a fine. Then explain this refinance application to me, I said. Plain. What did they think would happen? Plainly, somebody meant to borrow against your house in your name without telling you. If it went through the debt lands on your deed. On you. He let it sit. Whoever did it either believed you would never look or believed you would be gone before you did. It is my son, I said. Jerry did not argue. He did not comfort me either, and I was grateful for that. He only nodded once, slow. Then you have got a hard choice, he said. But understand me. You cannot just throw them out. You cannot change the locks. You cannot put their things on the snow. Do that, and the law turns and looks at you instead of at him. He picked up the yellow legal pad and wrote as he spoke the way he must have done 10,000 times. The lawful road is a 30-day notice to vacate. In writing. Proper service, proper dates. 30 days, and then they leave, and no judge in this county blinks. We do this by the law on paper the right way. That is the only road that keeps you clean. I looked at the flyer of my house, the front porch I had rebuilt myself, priced like a used truck. You are telling me I hold every card, I said. I am telling you the law is entirely on your side, Jerry said. The house is yours. The forgery is his. The notice is yours to serve or to hold. I will lay out the options in order, and I will draft any one of them tonight. He set the pad down and folded his hands. But I will not choose for you, Ray. I have known you too long to take that from you. The next move belongs to you alone. The radiator ticked. Somewhere past the gray window, a truck downshifted on the hill. I thought of the notice and of my son's flat, cold face and of the 30 days that would start the moment I said the word. But not yet. First, there was a thing I had to know the size of, and it was not in this office. I closed the folder and stood. Before any of that, I said, there is a number I need to settle at the bank. By the time I got home that afternoon, I knew there was one lock nobody could ever pick again if I closed it myself. The house was empty. Nate and Rachel had taken the kids to the outlet stores in the next county the way they did the day after Christmas, and I was glad of the quiet. I went straight to the home office at the back of the house, the small room I had paneled with my own hands the first winter we owned the place. I set Jerry's folder on the desk beside the laptop. The tea I had left there that morning was cold and skinned over. I did not warm it. Outside the window, the dusk was already coming down. 4 in the afternoon, and the light going gray over the snow. I sat, and I let my hands rest flat on the desk for a moment, the wide, scarred knuckles I had earned across 43 years of the trade. Then I found the number for Lakemont Savings Bank, and I dialed. A woman answered on the third ring. Her voice was calm and even, a phone voice worn smooth by practice. Lakemont Savings, this is Diane Whitaker. How can I help you? I told her my name, and that I needed to speak about my mortgage. She did not rush. She walked me through her verification, the careful way, the account number, the last 4 of my social, my date of birth, the address on file. 118 Birch Lane, Ashford, I said. Thank you, Mr. Callahan. You're verified. A small pause, keys moving under her fingers. What can I do for you today? I want the payoff balance on the house, I said. The full number, what it takes to close it out completely. More keys. I looked at the folder while she worked. Somewhere inside it was the flyer of my own front porch and the paper with a signature on it I had never set my hand to. I did not say a word about that. She did not need to carry any of it. The word for that thing lived only in my own head that afternoon, a refinance application built on a lie, and I meant to make it worthless before the sun was down. All right, Diane said. Your payoff balance is $58,940, Mr. Callahan. That figure is good through the end of the month. I wrote it on the corner of Jerry's folder in pencil. $58,940. 16 years. I had paid on that house month after month, and it had come down to a number a man could say in one breath. Pay it in full, I said. Today. I told her I had already called the retirement custodian that morning and had the distribution wired into my checking, and that it had landed an hour ago. Jerry had walked me through what it would cost me come April, the tax on a draw that size, and I had told him the same thing I told her now. From my pension account, I said. Every dollar of it is clean and it is mine. The keys stopped. For the first time, her voice caught just slightly, the practiced smoothness meeting something it had not expected. All of it at once, she said. That is a large draw, sir. I want to make sure I have you right. You'd like to pay the entire payoff balance, $58,940, as a single transfer from your retirement account. Is that correct? That is correct. She asked me where the funds would come from. She read the 2 account numbers back to me. She asked me again, in a different way, whether I understood. This would empty a substantial sum from the pension. In one day, whether I might want to speak with someone before I authorized it. There was no push to it. Only care. It struck me sitting there in the gray light that this stranger on the telephone was the first person in a long while to treat me plain and straight. No angle underneath it, no waiting to see what I would give up next. I understand, I said. It is the one thing I never let anyone touch. Time it did some good. That account was $268,000. I had built it slow, a little at a time, back when Nora was still teaching, and we still believed the ordinary things would hold. Through 16 years of covering everyone else, the mortgage and the repairs and the tuition, help and the quiet checks, I never asked back. I had never once dipped into it. I had told myself it was for later, for being old and not a burden. Now I understood I had been keeping it for exactly this, without knowing, and it had finally found the right job. Understood, Diane said, and the warmth came back into her voice. I'll process it now. I heard her working. The radiator ticked. A car went by slow on the snow outside, chains chattering and faded. Once it clears, she said, the home is entirely yours, free and clear. There will be no balance and no lion remaining. You'll have your confirmation and a formal release in the mail within a few business days. Thank you, I said. Truly. The screen refreshed. I watched the line resolve itself the way a joint pulls true when you finally seat it right. Paid in full pending. 2 words and a promise. I sat back in the chair and I let the breath go out of me slow, the whole of it, the way a man sets down a weight he has carried so long he has stopped feeling it as weight and only knows it gone when it is gone. 16 years. Gone in the space of one afternoon call, and the house under me was mine, and no one could ever again file a thing against it and make it stick. I printed the confirmation. The little machine hummed and gave up one warm page. I slid it into the folder with the deed squared the edges and carried the whole of it to the shop closet, up behind the box of Nora's sheet music, where no hand in that house would ever think to reach. Then I came back and sat down. The house was secure. One thing was still open. I drew the old ledgers off the shelf, the ones I kept in my own square hand, and I turned the pages back until I stopped at a figure I already knew by heart. Before I reveal what that $13,400 actually was, and why I chose that exact number, comment the number 13 below so I know you're still sitting here with me. And please note, this story contains some fictional details and may not be entirely factual. If that isn't what you came for, you're free to step away right here. That evening, under a single lamp, the number I had written on a Christmas check 2 nights before rose up out of an old statement to meet me. I had told myself I was only tidying accounts. A man who has just secured his house wants to see the rest of his ledgers lie flat and honest under his hand. So I pulled them down, the old ones I kept in my own square, print the columns I had ruled myself with a straight edge, because I never trusted a printed line to stay true. I turned the pages back and back past the years of small entries, past the shop and the truck, and the long, ordinary arithmetic of a life. I stopped where I always knew I would stop. I had not needed to search. I had only needed to let my hand do what it already meant to do. There it was in ink gone brown at the edges, a withdrawal, $13,400. Not a figure rounded off for comfort. The exact amount to the dollar that I had handed my son across a kitchen table one bad winter, when his world had come apart at a seam he would not name. I remembered the shape of him that night. Younger, thinner in the face, his hands not yet in the habit of holding a phone between us like a shield. He had sat where the lamp could not quite reach him, and he had promised me the way a man promises when he still believes his own word means something. "I will pay back every cent, Dad," he said. "I swear it." I had waved it off. I told myself that was the right thing, the fatherly thing, the thing Nora would have done with her gentle warning instead of a demand. "I am not worried about the money, son," I told him. "I am worried about you." He had laughed then, that easy laugh he still had in those years before it went cold and hollow. "You will never even miss it," he said. He was right. I never missed the money. I only missed the boy I thought I had raised. I sat with the ledger open, and I made myself say the truth I had kept from myself and from anyone who might one day hear this since the first night at the table. That check I wrote 2 nights ago was no accident of the pen. It was not sentiment. It was not some soft old man reaching for a round holiday sum. I had chosen $13,400 on purpose, every digit deliberate, and I had chosen it as a test. I want that plain because I have watched myself these 2 days try to dress it up as instinct. It was not instinct. It was a decision made cold and clear at my own desk. I gave my son back his own debt wrapped as a Christmas gift, and I waited to see one thing. I waited to see if he would recognize it. I waited to see if some part of him buried under the phone and the flat face and the plans he thought I could not hear would look at that number and go still and know it. Know what it was. Know what he owed not in dollars, but in the whole long ledger of a life I had spent on him. He had not recognized it. He had not gone still. He had not paused, not for a breath. He had glanced at the amount, the way a man glances at a receipt, and he had folded it into his pocket, and he had told me the house would be easier to sell once I was somewhere smaller. He held his own debt in his hand, and he felt nothing move. I turned the pages forward from that old winter, and I read my own life like a stranger reading it. The tuition I quietly covered. The repairs I paid and called routine. The 16 years of it. The whole roughly $500,000 of it. None of it ever coming back, all of it sitting under this one small loan like a foundation under a house, and threaded through every year the small lies. The story that did not match the receipt. The thanks that arrived only when something more was needed. I had told myself each one was nothing. A boy being a boy, a man under pressure. Laid end to end in my own hand, they made a road, and the road went in one direction only, and it went away from me. The boy who once called himself my helper, who carried my tools and wanted to learn the joints, that boy had been gone a long time, longer than I had let myself count. I closed the ledger. Nora watched me from the shelf from the photograph where the light had caught her the summer before she got sick. I looked back at her a while. Then I said it out loud to the quiet room, because some things a man has to hear in his own voice before he can believe he means them. I handed you back your own debt for Christmas, I said, and you told me to disappear. The words went out into the lamplight and came back to me sounding like a verdict. There was no anger left in them. That was the thing that frightened me a little. Anger I knew how to carry. This was only clear and level and final the way a plumb line is final. I had done the test, and the test was answered, and the answering was done. But I was not a man who could act on a closed account without giving the account holder one last look at the books. Whatever came next, I owed him that much, one honest chance spoken to his face in daylight, so that no part of this could ever be called a thing done behind his back. I would give it. And I already knew sitting there that when the words were said and the chance was refused, I would not find the strength to finish in any ledger or any deed. I would have to go into the front room, to the one thing in that house that still had her voice in it, and lift the lid. The next morning I promised myself that if my son could give me one true word, I would tear the whole plan to pieces. I got up before the others and made coffee the way I had made it for 40 years, and I turned the radio off, though I always kept it on for the weather. I wanted no other voices in that kitchen. Snow had come again in the night, and the window over the sink was gray with it, the light thin and flat, the kind of light that shows a man every line in his own hands. I set 2 cups on the table. I sat with my back straight and both palms flat on the wood, and I waited for Nate the way you wait for a storm you have already seen on the horizon. He came down late, phone in his hand thumb moving before his feet had cleared the last stair. He did not say good morning. He never did any more. He poured his own coffee and leaned against the counter instead of sitting, which was his way of standing over a thing, and he looked at me the way you look at a bill you do not intend to pay. You wanted something, he said. I want to talk, I said. Sit down, Nate. He sat, but only on the edge, angled toward the door. I kept my voice level. I had promised myself that I would keep it level, that whatever he did, I would not raise it, because a raised voice would give him somewhere to hide, and I did not want to give him anywhere to hide. "There are papers," I said. "Papers about this house that I never signed and never agreed to. A refinance application. That is the name for it, an application to borrow money against this place. I have seen it now. I know what is on it." He did not blink. That was the first thing. A man with nothing to hide flinches, gets loud, gets confused. Nate only set his coffee down and gave me that flat, cold face, the one I had watched him practice on his mother years ago when he wanted something. "Here is what I am offering you," I said. "One chance, and I mean it, and I will only say it once. Tell me the truth this morning, all of it, and we fix it together. Quietly. No police. No lawyers past Jerry and Jerry only to unwind it clean. You come to me, and you say it, and I tear the rest up, and we never speak of it again. Nate, if there is anything you want to tell me about the papers, now is the time." For a moment, the kitchen was so still I could hear the furnace tick in the wall. Rachel had come to the doorway, in her robe arms already folded, and she stood there listening, the way she listened to everything, adding it up. "I do not know what you are talking about, old man," Nate said. I looked at him a long time. "I think you signed something you should not have," I said. "I think you put a name on paper that was not yours to put there, and then it turned the way I had feared it would turn." He stood up. He did not shout. He talked fast and smooth, the way he talked to customers who were not going to buy, and he told me I was going through his things, that I was a bitter old man who could not stand not being in the middle of everything, that I had controlled this family for years, and now I was inventing crimes to keep doing it. He said it easily. That was the worst part, how easily it came, how little it cost him. Rachel nodded from the doorway. She did not add a word. She did not need to. Her folded arms said it for her. I stood too, and my knee caught the way it does in the cold, and I put my hand on the back of the chair and held it there so he would not see. "Prove it," Nate said. "Either way, this place is ours the day you are in the ground." And there it was, the one word of truth I had been waiting for, and it was the ugliest one of all. I took his coat off the hook and pushed out through the back door into the snow, and the cold came in around my ankles, and he crossed the yard without looking back. Breath white above him, phone already up again. Rachel watched me a moment more, then turned and went up the stairs. The house closed over the quiet like water. I stood there until the coffee went cold. Then I went up too slow on the steps, and Lily's door was open. She was on the floor of her room, sketchbook flat in front of her, pencils scattered on the carpet, where she liked them, close enough to reach without looking. She had heard. Children always hear. She did not lift her head all the way. She kept drawing small, careful circles, and she said it low, almost to the page. "I do not think what my daddy said was right, Grandpa." Something in me that had been swaying all morning set itself level and held. I did not tell her she was right. I did not tell her anything about the house or the papers, or what a grandfather does when a son gives him no true word. I only stood in the doorway a while and let her draw. "You are a good girl, Lily," I said. "You keep drawing." Then I did the one thing I had come up meaning to do. I had a small folded note in my shirt pocket and Jerry's business card with it, and while she reached across the carpet for a darker pencil, I stepped in and slipped both into the back of her sketchbook, deep behind the last pages she used, where a careful girl keeps things and a careless man never looks. I said nothing about it. I smoothed the cover shut and left her to her circles. That night, I finally reached for the one thing of Nora's I had never dared to open. By lamplight, that night, I turned the music box of Nora over in my hands and found the little brass panel in its base that that I had never once thought to open. The house had gone quiet by then. Nate and Rachel had shut their door hours before. Mason's screen glowed and died somewhere down the hall, and Lily had long since fallen asleep over her circles. I had one lamp burning by the mantel, and the fire gone down to embers, that low orange breathing that a fire does when it is nearly finished. I sat in the chair I had built with my own hands the winter before Nora died, and I held the thing she loved. The crystal caught the lamplight the way it always had. I had dusted it 1,000 times in 9 years and never once turned it over. A man does not turn over the things he is afraid of. But my thumb found the seam in the base, a fine line I had taken for a maker's mark, and when I pressed it, the little brass panel gave with a small click the way a good drawer gives when the wood is true. Inside was a folded sheet of paper. Her paper. I knew the neat looping hand before I knew a single word, that gentle forward slant, the loops she made on her letters like she was tying each one down so it would not blow away. My hands are wide and scarred, and they have held boards steady in a gale, and they shook now. I lifted the lid of the box first the way I had watched her do it. The slow waltz began one turn, and then another, thin and true under the whole room. I opened the letter, and I read, "My dear Ray, if you have found this, then the fear I carried has come true." I had to stop there. The waltz kept turning. I set my thumb over the words like a man keeping his place in a storm, and I made myself go on. She wrote the way she talked. No wasted lines. She said she had sealed the letter in her last months when the doctors had stopped saying the hopeful things, and that she had written it because there was one thing she had never found the courage to say to my face. Nora, who warned me gently my whole life instead of arguing, had waited until she was gone to warn me plain. "I have watched our son learn to love what you give more than he loves you." I read that line, and the embers ticked and settled in the grate. 16 years I had covered the payments and the repairs and the tuition, and never once let myself think it in those words. She had thought it. She had watched Nate hold out his hand, and had seen what filled it and what did not, and she had carried the knowing all those years, the way she carried everything quiet, without a raised voice, without a word to me. She had not known how to say it while she was alive, so she had built it a little brass room and left it for me to find. She did not write a prophecy. She did not tell me what would come. She only told me what a mother had seen across a supper table year after year and could not unsee. And then she told me the thing I most needed and least wanted to hear. Do not let guilt shrink you into nothing. That was the whole of her love in one line. She knew me. She knew I would take his failures and lay them on my own back, that I would find the fault in myself for giving too much or too little, that a man raised to keep the peace would rather grow small than call his own son what he was. She had watched me do it for 34 years, and she was doing it still, reaching back through the box to hold me level. There was one more thing near the bottom set, apart from the rest. She wrote that she had made her own quiet plans for the children, that she had put something aside for Mason and Lily, out of what was hers alone, and that Jerry would know when the time came. She did not explain it. She never was one to explain a kindness. She simply set it down and moved past it the way she would slip a folded bill into a coat pocket and walk out of the room before you found it. I have made arrangements for the children, and Jerry will know when the time comes. And then the last of it. Be braver than I ever was and choose yourself. I read the whole letter 3 times. The first time to hear the words. The second time to hear her. The third time I read it slow, the way you read a thing you already know you will keep for the rest of your life. And somewhere in that third reading, 9 years of held breath let go of me all at once. I wept. I had not wept since the funeral, not at the graveside, and not in the long, empty nights after, when I had told myself, a widower keeps his feet under him for the sake of the children. I wept now with the box still playing, and her handwriting warm in my lap. And it was not the grief I had braced for all those years. It was something closer to being forgiven. "All right, love," I said to the empty room. "All right." The waltz came round to its last few notes and slowed and stopped the way it always did, and I let it stay stopped. I folded the letter along the creases she had made careful so the loops of her words met the way she had left them. Then I looked across the room to the desk and to the blank sheet lying square in the lamplight, where I had left it waiting on me since morning. I knew now exactly what I was going to write on it. I dried my face with the back of one scarred hand, and I reached over and I uncapped my pen. Before the sun came up on the 28th of December, I wrote the last thing I would ever leave my son in that house. The kitchen was cold and blue at 4 in the morning, the furnace not yet caught up to the hour, and I sat at the table with a single lamp, and the papers Jerry had walked me through line by patient line, until I could have written them in my sleep. I did not write them in my sleep. I wrote them awake, more awake than I had been in years, my breath showing faint in the lamplight. I wrote out the 30-day notice to vacate. I dated it the 28th of December, and I marked plainly that the 30 days ran from that morning. I read every word twice the way Jerry had told me to, because a thing done in the dark should be done clean. My hand did not shake. 43 years of drawing a straight line with a pencil against wood had left me that much even now, even here. Then I folded in the other page. The bank had sent it 3 days back, and I had read it so many times the crease had gone soft. Paid in full. The payoff balance was gone cleared, and the house stood free and clear. No lien against it, nothing left for anyone to borrow against or forge a name onto ever again. I set that confirmation inside the envelope with the notice so that when Nate opened it, he would understand in one breath that the refinance application was dead, that the thing he had built in secret had come down without a sound. I sealed the envelope. I wrote his name on the front in the plain block letters I used to mark lumber. Then I carried it into the living room to the mantel, where Nora's crystal music box sat, the way it had sat for 9 years, catching the little light there was. I lifted it, felt the familiar weight of it in my scarred hands, and I laid the envelope flat on the wood beneath it. I set the box back down on top square and careful. He would have to lift his mother's keepsake to read what I had left him. I wanted that. Not the cruelty of it, the truth of it. Whatever he had let himself become, he would have to hold something of hers first. Jerry had a second copy of the same notice signed and dated, and he would send it certified the moment the courthouse opened. That one was for the record. The one under the music box was for my son. I packed one case. 1. A man learns fast how little he needs when he stops pretending he owes the whole world an explanation. I stood a moment in the front hall, listening to the house breathe the tick of the baseboards, the small sounds of 4 people asleep upstairs, who did not know the ground had already shifted under them. I did not go up. I had said everything I had to say, and I had said it in ink. Before I stepped out, I made one call. Jerry answered on the second ring, the way old friends do when they have been half waiting all night. "It is done," I said. "It is under the box." "Good," Jerry said. "Drive careful. The roads will be sheet ice past the county line." "The note for Lily," I said. "The one I tucked in her sketchbook. I need you to keep that safe no matter what happens in this house. Whatever they do, that stays hers." "You have my word, Ray," he said. "It is safeguarded. Now go." I went. The truck started hard in the cold and then held 19 years faithful, and I backed down the drive with my headlights off until I reached the road so the beams would not sweep the upstairs windows. The snow came down soft and steady. Ashford slept. I drove out past the shut diner and the dark church and the town line, and I did not look in the mirror. The regional airport was nearly empty at that hour, one clerk and a floor still wet from the mop. Southbound air, the gate agent said, boarding soon. I bought a coffee I did not drink and sat by the window with my case at my feet, and that was when the phone began. The first 3 calls I let ring out. The fourth I answered because a man should look a thing in the eye once before he walks away from it. "What is this, Dad?" His voice came fast and high, no floor under it. "You cannot do this. This is our home." "No, Nathan." It was the only time I ever called him that, and I heard it land. "Read the papers under the music box of your mother. It is my home and it always was. You are going to put us on the street." A breath. "You are really going to put your own grandchildren on the street. You have 30 days. I said, level as a spirit line. 30 days and I will not be the one who files against you. That is my choice to make. It is not a promise about what the bank does when it finds its own paper, and I will not lie to you about that. It is still more mercy than you gave me." The bluster went out of him all at once. What was left was small. "Dad, please." I looked out at the runway lights blurring in the snow, and I felt no triumph in it, only a great and settled quiet. The way a room goes quiet. After a machine you had stopped hearing finally shuts off. "Goodbye, Nate." I ended the call. Then I held the button down and watched the screen go black, and I set the dead phone in my coat pocket, and I picked up my case because they were calling the Rose. The cabin door sealed with a soft, heavy sound like a book closing. The engines built. We rolled and turned, and then the ground let go, and Ashford fell away beneath the wing under all that snow, the streetlights small and then smaller, the whole town shrinking to a smear of white that the clouds took a moment later. Hours on, at the far end of it, a warm, dark wind, and a man leaning against a slate gray. Kia lifted a hand to me. "Welcome to Marisol Key, sir," Diego said, easy as anything. 12 years of that same easy welcome in his voice, and he took my case before I could reach for it. For the first time in 16 years, nobody on earth could reach me, and I found myself smiling. The plane door opened onto air so warm and green and alive that I remembered all at once that I had a body. It came up the jet bridge to meet me, that air thick and sweet, and faintly of salt, and it settled over my shoulders like a hand laid gently there. For years, the cold had been a cage around me. It had locked my knee every December and made a fist of my scarred hands and kept me hunched and careful, moving through my own house like a man expecting to be struck. Now the bars simply were not there. I stood in the open-air terminal, palms and rafters, and a slow ceiling fan turning above, and I breathed, and nothing hurt in the breathing. Diego was waiting past the low rail, leaning on the slate-gray Kia, the way he had leaned on it the night before, unhurried, a man with all the time in the world. He took my case again before I could reach for it. He was maybe 40, brown and easy, 12 years of driving this same island road worn comfortable into him. "First time on Marisol Key," he said. It was not quite a question. "First time anywhere," I said, "in a long time." He laughed low and pulled out onto a road that ran between water on one side and green on the other, palms leaning all one way from years of wind. He talked, and none of it mattered, and that was the mercy of it. He told me which fruit stand had the good mango, and that the bridge flooded at the high tide in September, and that his cousin ran a boat, you could take out past the reef. He asked me nothing. He did not want anything from me. For 16 years, every voice at my table had wanted something, and here was a stranger who only wanted me to see the water. "Well, uncle," he said, catching my eye in the mirror, "the island runs on island time. Nobody rushes you here." "You have no idea how good that sounds," I said, and I meant it down to the floor of me. The resort was open on every side. No doors to speak of, only wide rooms that let the breeze walk straight through. There were ponds set into the stone floor of the lobby, with fat orange and white koi, turning slow circles, and the light came off the water and moved on the ceiling. A young man in a pale shirt came toward me with something in his hands, and before I understood it, he had lifted a lei of small pink shells over my head and let it settle on my chest. "Welcome to the Azure Sands, sir," he said. "Is anyone joining you?" The shells were cool. His fingers had brushed the back of my neck, careful kind, and I could not remember the last time a stranger had touched me with any tenderness at all. 68 years old, and it undid something in me, a small, clean ache behind the eyes. "No," I said, "just me. That's the whole plan." They gave me a room high up, and I went out onto the balcony and stopped. The Gulf lay out under me so turquoise. It looked invented a color, no. Honest ocean should be shading pale green near the sand, and then deeper and deeper, until it went the blue of a thing you could fall into. Boats sat far out, small and white and still. The heat pressed on my forearms where I gripped the rail, and I noticed I was gripping it, and I made myself let go because there was nothing here to brace against. I went down to the sand. I rolled my trousers to the knee like a boy, and I left my shoes at the top of the beach, and I walked out until the water found me. It came warm around my ankles, warm as a bath. Warm as nothing I had felt in my life, and it slid up over the knee that had ached every winter for 10 years, the knee that seized in the cold and made me grip the backs of chairs. The warmth went into it. I stood there and felt the ache lift out of the joint and go somewhere out to sea, and I nearly said something aloud to no one. I found a chair under a leaning palm, and I sat, and the sound of the water came in and went out, in and out, patient, and I did not fight it. I fell asleep in the middle of the afternoon with the sun on my shins. I woke at dusk, not knowing where I was. The light had gone gold and then rose. For one long breath, I could not name the country or the year, and the old part of me waited for the flare of alarm, the lurch toward whatever was wrong. It did not come. I sat in the strange rose light and let it be strange, and it was fine. It was better than fine. The sun went down over the water in a slow burn, and I breathed all the way down to the bottom of my chest, further than I had breathed in years. Out here, nobody needed me. Out here, there was nothing left in my hands that anyone could take. I had spent so long being a thing that other people reached for that I had forgotten I was also just a man on a beach watching the day close, owing the evening nothing. That night, I lay down to the sound of the waves coming through the open room, and I slept. I slept 10 hours without breaking, once the sleep of a much younger man, no dreams that stayed, no waking at 3 to lie staring. I woke to bright water and a body that felt scrubbed clean. Tomorrow I decided I would do something I had not done since I was a boy. The next morning, the instructor was maybe 25 and built like the ocean owed him money. His name was Cole Bennett, and he told me he had spent 7 years teaching people like me how not to drown a small boat. He said it the way a man says a thing he still loves. He had a laugh that came up from somewhere honest, loud enough that 2 tourists on the neighboring boat looked over before we had even cast off. I had booked the lesson the night before, quickly. The way you jump into cold water so your body cannot vote. If I had waited until morning, I would have found a reason. I had spent my whole life finding reasons. "You ever sail before, sir?" Cole asked, coiling a line in his big brown hands. "Son, I have not done a single thing just for fun in 16 years, I said. He stopped coiling. He looked at me, and for a second the loudness went out of him. "Okay," he said. "That is heavy. Let us fix that today." Then the loudness came back, and it was better than pity, and we pushed off into a warm chop under a sun that had no mercy and meant none of it kindly or cruelly. It just burned clean and white off the water. I made a fool of myself inside of a minute. Cole handed me 2 lines and told me which was which, and my hands, which had shaped 10,000 drawer joints, turned into a bird's nest. The sheet crossed the halyard. Something wrapped my wrist. The little boat swung its nose into the wind and sat there like a mule, and Cole told me to lean, and I leaned the wrong way, and the world tipped up green, and then I was in it. The sea went up my nose and down my throat, warm and salt and alive. I came up spitting. Cole was already there, laughing, hauling me by the back of my shirt like a landed fish. "You good uncle," he said. "Better than I have been in years," I said, and I was not being brave. The water had knocked something loose. We got me back in. We tried again. I did the same thing in a different order and went straight back over the side. And this time I swallowed a proper mouthful, and my old knees banged the hull, and I hung there in the warm chop with my hair in my eyes. 68 years old, soaked to the bone in front of 2 strangers on a nicer boat. And I started to laugh. It came up out of me the way Cole's did from somewhere I had bricked over a long time ago. It was not a chuckle. It was the whole thing, the kind of laugh that hurts, that folds you and steals your air and makes your eyes run so you cannot tell the sea from the crying. I laughed until my stomach ached, and I had to hold the rail. The tourists were laughing too, not at me, with me the whole dock caught in it. I had forgotten a laugh could do that to a body. I had forgotten it was a thing that happened to me, and not just around me. Cole pulled me up the second time, grinning, and I sat dripping on the little bench and shook. "Give me the lines," I said. He handed them over. And here is the strange part. My hands, which could not steer to save my life, knew exactly what to do with a rope. Cole showed me a cleat hitch once, and I made it clean. And then I made a bowline he had not shown me at all, the loop tight and true, because a bowline is just a thing that has to hold, and I have spent my life making things that had to hold. Cole turned the knot over in his fingers. "Where did you learn to tie like that?" he said. 43 years of making things that had to hold," I said. He shook his head, and there was real respect in it, the easy kind that a young man gives an old one when nobody is keeping score. It was the opposite of the silence I lived in. I thought of Mason, 16, and always behind his earbuds and his screen. A boy I shared a roof and a name with, and could not reach across a dinner table. Here was a stranger young enough to be my grandson, teaching me, learning from me, the 2 of us trading what we had, easy as breathing. It cost nothing, and it was worth more than the house. On the 3rd try, the wind came, and I did not fight it. Cole called the move, and I leaned into it and let the boat do what it wanted, and the sail snapped taut, with a sound like a slammed door, and the little hull leaned hard and leapt forward across the open water. The spray came off the bow. The whole boat came alive under me and ran, and I whooped. I whooped out loud over open water like a boy, the sound torn straight out of me and gone downwind before I could be ashamed of it. Cole was hollering beside me. The tourists were cheering. I held the line with my scarred hands and my sunburnt neck, and I flew, And for the length of that run, I was not owed anything, and I owed nothing, and joy was not a thing that had been denied me at all. It was a skill. I had simply let it rust. We came back in when my arms had nothing left. I climbed onto the dock on legs that shook, grinning so hard my face hurt, salt drying white on my skin. That night, my muscles begged for rest, but something restless in me wanted more of the island. I stopped counting the days after that and started counting the small, ridiculous joys instead. On the 30th, I took a kayak into the mangroves. A boy at the rental dock pushed me off with one hand and told me to follow the markers, and then the channel took me, and the world went quiet in a way I had forgotten was possible. The trees closed overhead. The roots came down into the water like fingers, and the light broke into coins on the surface, and the only sound was my paddle and the drip off the blade between strokes. No engine, no screen, no voice asking me for anything. I had not turned my phone on since the airport, and I did not turn it on there either. I do not know how long I drifted before Nora came up in me. There was no reason for it. A heron stood on a root and watched me pass, and something about the stillness of the thing undid me, and I stopped paddling and let the boat sit. I had held it down for 6 days on that island, under sails and sunburn, and in the mangroves there was nothing left to hold it with. I cried the way a man cries when nobody built a room for it. Quiet, ashamed of nothing. I said her name once out loud, and the water took it, and the heron did not care. And that was the kindest thing anyone had done for me in a year. I let it come. Then I let it go. I paddled back with my chest scraped clean. On New Year's Eve, I climbed the lighthouse. It stood at the north point, coral stone gone gray with 100 years of salt, a spiral stair inside worn to a shine by other feet. My bad leg complained on the cold steps, and I gripped the iron rail and kept going, one turn and then the next, until the stair spat me out onto a narrow ring at the top, and the wind hit me full in the face. I saw the whole island at once. That is the thing about height. It shrinks a man's trouble to a size he can hold. Down there, the water was one flat sheet of hammered silver, the marina, a scatter of white toothpicks, the road, a pale thread running the length of the quay. Somewhere far north, under a different sky, there was a house on a street with my name on the paper, and here it was too small to see and too small to matter. I stood in that wind a long time, and I noticed the anger was gone. I stood there waiting for it, the way you press a tooth that ached yesterday, and there was nothing. No heat, no ledger running behind my eyes. It had burned down at some point on that island without my permission, and left something clean where it had been swept and bare and my own. I had carried it so long I did not trust the quiet at first. Then I did. The wind took my hat, and I let it go too. On the first day of the year, I went out on a charter. The captain was a broad man with a gray beard and forearms like mooring rope, and he ran the boat 2 miles out to where the water turned deep and dark, and he handed me a rod and told me to wait. I waited. When the strike came, it nearly took the rod out of my scarred hands. "Reel him steady," the captain said. "Do not fight him. He is stronger than he looks," I said. My arms were already burning. "Are we not all?" he said. It took me 20 minutes. My shoulders shook and the sweat ran into my eyes, and the fish went down again every time I thought it was done, and the captain stood at my elbow the whole time saying, "Steady, steady," and at last a broad silver body came up thrashing into the light, and he swung it aboard. 68 years old, I said, landing it and my first fish. "Then it is long overdue, my friend," he said. Something came back into my chest with that fish. Not the fish. The other thing. The old feeling of having made something with these hands, the way a joint used to come together, true under my square. Pride, I suppose, though it had been so long I had to look twice to name it. That evening, I ate at a seafood shack in a gravel lot. Plastic chairs, a hand-painted board garlic, shrimp in a paper basket that I ate with my fingers because there was no other honest way to eat them. The grease ran down my wrist. Nobody looked. Nobody knew whose grandfather I was or whose money I was, and I sat in that gravel lot, a stranger among strangers, and understood that I liked it. I liked being nobody's bank. I liked being nobody's old man. A pelican decided my paperback belonged to it. It landed on the next chair with the arrogance of a creature that has never once been told no, sidestepped closer, and fixed one flat yellow eye on my book, as though it meant to check it out and never return it. I moved the book. It stared. I laughed out loud in that gravel lot alone at a bird, at how completely the world did not care who I used to be. A fisherman at the next table grinned at the show. "You look like a man who just got out of somewhere," he said. "Something like that," I said. I went back to my shrimp. Somewhere under my breath, a tune had started up on its own slow 3 beats to the bar, the one that lived in the crystal box on the mantel at home, and I was humming it into the warm dark, without knowing I had begun. 2 tables away, a woman with silver hair lifted her head and looked at me because she knew the song. Her name was Grace, and she hummed the second half of a song I had never been able to finish. I had come down to the beach because the room was too quiet, and the ocean was not. The festival had grown up out of the sand while I wasn't watching. String lights ran between the palms in long yellow loops, and a man on a folding stool played a ukulele that sounded too small for the size of the night. There was a bonfire down near the water, throwing sparks up into the dark, and folding tables set with paper plates and citronella candles. Under all of it, steady as a clock, the surf came in and went out. I found a spot at the edge of the light where I could stand and not be spoken to. That was the plan. I had gotten good at plans that kept people at arm's length. Then the ukulele stopped between songs, and in the small gap of quiet, I heard a woman 2 tables over humming a tune low to herself. It took me a second to place it. When I placed it, my hand went out and found the back of a chair on its own. It was the waltz, Nora's waltz, the one the crystal music box played, the slow one that turned in the dark on the mantel. I had heard the first half of that song 10,000 times in my life, and I had never once made it to the end without something in my chest closing up. The woman humming had gone straight through the part where I always stopped. She carried it out to the last turn and let it settle the way you set a cup down without a sound. She saw me looking. She had silver hair worn loose, and she wore it like she had stopped asking anyone's permission a long time ago. "You look like a man carrying a whole winter around in July," she said. "That obvious," I said. "Only to someone who has carried one too." She had a paper cup of something, and she tipped it toward the empty chair beside her, not pushing, just offering. I sat. I am not sure why. Maybe because she had finished the song and had not made a thing of it. Her name was Grace. She had been a librarian in the county system for 29 years, which meant she said that she had spent 3 decades learning when to talk and when to just find a person the thing they came in looking for. Her husband had been gone 11 years. She said it plainly, the way you say a fact about the weather, and then she waited, and she did not ask me a single thing that would cost me anything to answer. That was the part I could not get over. She asked me nothing, so I started giving it away on my own. I told her about the check first because it was the easiest to say and the hardest to carry, a check on Christmas Eve at my own table and the cold words that came with it. Then, because one thing pulls the next behind it, I told her the shape of the rest. 16 years of paying. Mortgage and repairs and tuition and grocery money, 16 years of it, and never once a dollar back, and never once until this Christmas a thank you either. I told her about the papers I found, about a signature on a bank document, my own name in a hand that was not mine filed against the house I owned. I told her badly out of order, the way you tell a thing you are still ashamed of my voice going flat in the places where it wanted to break. She did not gasp. She did not tell me those were terrible people, though they were. She did not tell me I had been right to do what I did. That was the thing. If she had told me I was right, I would have stopped talking, because a stranger telling you you're right is just a stranger telling you what you paid to hear. She only listened, and every so often she nodded like she was setting each piece down on a shelf where it would be safe. My wife used to hum that waltz, I said. She has been gone 9 years. Then let us raise a glass to her, Grace said, and she touched her paper cup to mine, and to whatever you build next. I would not know where to start. She looked at the fire for a while before she answered. She told me about the island then, about the year after her husband died, when she had come down here with 2 suitcases and no plan at all. She said the hardest part was not the loneliness, and not the money, and not the empty side of the bed. The hardest part, she said, was believing she was allowed to plant something, allowed to want a morning that felt good, allowed to build a whole second life while the first one was still warm in the ground. She said she had spent a year apologizing to a man who could not hear her before she understood he had never asked her to stop. The fire popped. The surf went out and came back. Late is not the same as never, she said. I had heard sayings like that my whole life from pulpits and greeting cards, and they had always rolled off me like rain off a truck hood. But she was 60 near enough and widowed 11 years, and she had done the thing she was describing, and she said it while looking at the water and not at me. And for the first time it went in. For the first time I believed it, sitting there with a paper cup and a song finally finished. We talked until the bonfire went low and the ukulele man packed up. We swapped nothing but first names and a number which she wrote for me on the back of a festival flyer, the ink pressing into the cheap paper. Back at the resort, the front desk clerk stopped me before the elevator. He had a forwarded envelope, and my name on it was written in the careful round handwriting of a child. I knew the handwriting before I opened it round, and careful the little circles she still used instead of dots. I did not open it that night. I carried it up to the room and set it against the lamp, and I looked at it the way you look at a splinter you know you will have to dig out. Then I made myself sleep, or tried to, and I waited for the light. Morning came flat and bright over the gulf. I took the letter out to the balcony with a coffee I already knew I would let go cold, and I set the cup on the rail, and I opened the envelope with my thumb the way I open everything badly. There were 2 pages folded in thirds pressed flat. She had written on both sides in pencil, and she had gone over some of the words twice where the lead had gone faint, so the letters stood up dark and stubborn on the page. She told me how it got to her first, because she is a careful girl and she knew I would wonder. She wrote that she had found the note in the back of her sketchbook, tucked behind the last page, and the little white card with it. That was the card I had slid in there the morning I left, the note folded once, and Jerry Mercer's business card behind it, his office address printed clean across the front. She had copied that address onto an envelope and put a stamp on it from the kitchen drawer and walked it to the box on the corner herself before her father collected the mail. Jerry had done the rest exactly as I asked him before I ever got on the plane. Anything that comes for me from that house, I had told him, you send it on to the Azure Sands, and you tell no one. He had folded her small envelope inside a larger one and forwarded it down, and the front desk had held it for me. A chain of quiet hands, and every one of them had held. Then the letter itself. "Dear Grandpa, I am sorry for what Daddy said," she wrote. And she did not try to explain it or soften it. She just set it down. I should have spoken up. "Are you okay?" She wrote that she had been at the table that night with her fork in her hand, and she had wanted to say something, and the words had stayed stuck. She wrote that she had seen the papers once on the hall table, the ones with my name on them, that she knew I had not signed, and she had known in her stomach that something was wrong, even if she did not have the words for it. She did not name it. She is 12. She should not have to name a thing like that, and I was glad the letter did not. And at the bottom, in the darkest pencil, the line she had clearly gone over twice. "Can I still be your granddaughter when I am grown?" I read it 3 times before I could see the page. The Gulf was doing its slow, bright work below me, and the coffee had gone cold again, but for a better reason this time. And I sat with the 2 pencil pages in my scarred hands, and I let the thing move through me. "Your grandmother used to say that children see everything and say nothing until they trust you with it. Nora said it once about this exact girl when Lily was small and watching us both from a doorway, and I had not understood it then. I understood it now. I went inside and got the small notebook I had bought 2 days before at the resort shop, the one with the plain blue cover. I had not known what to do with, and I brought it out, and I wrote her back the same morning, while the ink of her letter was still warm in my head. I kept it simple. I did not put one legal word in it. She is a child, and she does not need any of that carried on her shoulders, and I would not be the one to hand it to her. "Always, sweetheart," I wrote. "The door is never locked for you." I told her she had nothing to be sorry for, that the words she did not say at the table were not hers to carry, they were her father's, and I made no promise about him, and no promise about her mother, because a man should not promise a child what he cannot make true. I told her she had done a brave thing walking that envelope to the corner. I told her that being my granddaughter was not a thing time could take away from her, not when she was grown, not ever. Some bridges, I understood now, you leave standing on purpose. You burn the ones that only carried weight in one direction. This one carried the other way, and I meant to keep it up as long as I was standing. Then I turned the page and I did a thing I had not done in the whole long stretch of my adult life. I planned a future that no one had handed me. I wrote it down in the plain blue notebook in my bad, blocky hand. Winters down here on the island, where the cold could not reach my leg. A small workshop somewhere near the water, big enough for one bench and one saw, where for once I would build only what I wanted to build, and nothing anybody was owed. And on the last line I wrote the part that mattered most. A room kept ready, nothing fancy, a bed and a window and good light. Kept ready for one 12-year-old girl who told the truth at a table full of people who would not. I closed the notebook. I picked up the phone and I booked my flight home, and for the first time I was not afraid of what was waiting there. I stayed on the island until the last week of January, and I came home the day after the 30 days ran out. The cold met me at the Ashford airport like an old debt collector, but for the first time I did not owe it anything. It found my bad leg the moment the jet bridge opened the way it always had, and I felt the limp settle in before I reached the doors. Snow lay across the runway in long, clean sheets, blue under the lights, and the plows had left ridges along the edges like the grain in a board planed too fast. I stood a moment and let the wind work at me. It could have all of it. I had left nothing behind down south that the cold could reach. My truck was where I had parked it a lifetime ago, 19 winters on it, and one more starting now. The engine caught on the 3rd try. I let it warm while the frost cleared, and I drove the county road home with my scarred hands loose on the wheel, no hurry in me at all. I knew something before I turned onto Birch Lane. There was no glow ahead where the glow should be. I came around the last bend to 118, and the house stood dark against the snow, every window black, and the drive was empty. No car. No boots kicked off on the step. Just my own tire tracks cutting fresh where a car should have sat. They were gone. I sat in the cab a long minute. Then I climbed out and went up the walk I had poured myself, and I let myself into my own house with my own key. The front hall swallowed my voice when I said hello out of some old habit. Nothing answered. I found the switch, and the light showed me what the dark had been hiding. The rooms were stripped. Where the couch had stood, there was a pale rectangle in the carpet, clean as a scar. The dining table was gone, and its 4 legs had left 4 small squares in the dust. Everywhere I looked, the floor kept a record of what had stood there, and every square was the shape of something I had paid for. The house had been furnished on my back for 16 years, and now the furniture had walked out the door and left only its shadow. 2 things remained. My old workshop stool stood alone in the middle of the empty living room, 3-legged and paint-spattered, too worn to be worth taking. And on the mantel, exactly where I had left the envelope under it, sat the crystal music box, catching the hall light in its cut edges. They had left inside the 30-day notice to vacate. They had taken the deal rather than face what the forgery would have cost them, and they had cleared out clean rather than be dragged. I had wanted it settled. I had not let myself picture it looking like this. There was a bank statement waiting in the stack of mail by the door. The Christmas check had cleared on the 26th. $13,400 gone into his account, 2 days after he told me to stop existing, and he had still found the time to leave me something on the refrigerator. I never learned whose hand had shaped that signature. Jerry believed it was Rachel because the Loops were patient, and my son had never been patient about anything in his life. It did not matter in the end. One of them had written my name, and the other one had let it happen, and I had lived with both of them under my roof and seen neither. On the refrigerator, held by a single magnet, was a sheet of paper. I knew the hand before I read it, the hard slanted print my son used when he wanted a thing to look final. You chose money over family. I stood there and read it twice. Then I took it down and tore it in half, and I said it out loud to the empty kitchen in the plain, flat voice I had used my whole life. No, I chose myself over being used. The phone rang while I still held the 2 pieces. I did not startle. I answered it standing in this cold kitchen, with my coat still on. "They are gone, Jerry," I said. "They took the deal." "Good." Jerry's voice was steady the way it got before he set his glasses down on the yellow pad. "And there is something Nora set up that you should finally hear." I looked at the dark hall. The arrangements for the children. A trust. Her own money in the names of Mason and Lily for their schooling. Nate cannot touch a cent. She set it up before she passed. I did not answer for a moment. I set the torn note on the counter and put my hand flat on the cold laminate to steady it. "She never said a word," I said. "She said she did not need to," Jerry said. "She said you would understand when it mattered." He told me the rest, plainly, the way he told me everything. Years before she died in 2015, Nora had taken her own separate savings, the money she had kept quiet and careful all those teaching years, and she had put it together with her life insurance, and she had made a trust of it. 2 names on it. Mason and Lily, the only beneficiaries, and the whole of it for their education. Jerry had administered it since. It was built so that no hand but his could open it, and least of all, Nate's. Not 1 cent could ever be pulled out and turned into anything but a schooling for those two children. I could not speak. I stood in the ruin of the rooms and understood that she had seen all of it coming. Not the details, not the forged signature or the empty drive, but the shape of it. She had known who her son was in a way I had not let myself know, and while I was still trusting, she had quietly walked ahead of the whole disaster and put a wall around the only two people who needed protecting. She had done it gently, the way she warned instead of argued, and she had let me find it out on the night I would need it most. "Thank you, Jerry," I managed. "Get some rest, Ray," he said, and the line went quiet. I dropped the two halves of the note in the trash under the sink. Then I stood still and I listened. The furnace ticked. The wind pressed the windows. The old house settled around me the way it had for years, only now there was no other breath in it, no phone light glowing in the dark, no laugh with no warmth in it. The house was breathing at last, only for me. It was free and clear, and so I thought was I. I crossed to the mantel and picked up the music box in both hands. I carried it back to the center of the empty room, set it on the workshop stool, and wound it once. The one slow waltz lifted out of the crystal and spread thin and silver into all the stripped and shadowed rooms. 68 years old, a paid-off house in my name, an island tan, and finally, a life that belonged to me. The waltz was still turning when I lowered myself onto the couch, instead of reaching over to still it. My knee complained the way it always did in the cold, and I let it. There was no one left in the house to hear me grunt, no one to glance up, and then look back down at a screen. I sat inside the music the way a man sits in warm water, and I let the last of the crystal notes wind down on their own. The lamp threw a soft circle over the mantel. I had cleared almost everything from that room, but two things stood there now side by side, and they were the only things that mattered. Nora's photograph, black frame, her looking just past the camera, the way she always did, as if she saw something coming that the rest of us would only learn about later. And propped against the frame, the letter Lily had written me, her round, careful handwriting, the small circles she made instead of dots marching across the page. I got up, crossed the bare floor, and set the letter a little straighter against the photograph so the two of them leaned together. Then I took out my phone and scrolled back through the island. There they all were. The blue water off Marisol Key, the boat that went over sideways with me in it, and the picture. Cole snapped right after the two of us soaked and laughing, his big, honest laugh you could almost hear through the screen. The lighthouse at the end of the point. The bonfire on the sand orange against a dark sky. I had gone down there a hollowed-out man, and something had filled back in while I was not watching. My face in the last photographs was a face I had not worn in 16 years. I thought about the trust. It sat quietly somewhere in Jerry's careful keeping the way it had for 9 years, waiting for two children to grow into it. Lily would use it. I had no doubt about that girl. And Mason. I set the phone down and looked at Nora. "I did it, Nora," I said. "I finally chose me." The photograph only smiled the way it always had. I thought about my grandson, the boy with the earbuds always in the screen, always up in front of his face, who had not once looked at me across all of it. He was a beneficiary of everything his grandmother had done, and he did not know the half of it yet. Maybe he never would. But I let myself hope, sitting there in the lamplight, that one day the boy would set the screen down long enough to understand what she had built for him before he was old enough to ask. Hope was not the same as expecting. I had learned the difference the hard way. But I was allowed the hope, and I took it. "You knew, did you not?" I said to her. "You protected them all along." She had. While I was still trusting, still writing checks, still telling myself family was family, She had walked ahead of me and built her wall around the only two who needed one. She never argued about it. She warned once gently, and then she went ahead and did the thing quietly. I had spent 9 years thinking I was the one holding this family up. It turned out she had been holding up the parts that would outlast me. On the desk under the window sat 2 pieces of paper. One was a festival flyer folded once, and on the back of it, a telephone number in a looping hand that was not Nora's and not Lily's. Grace Delaney had written it there on the beach, humming while she did it all, and handed it over without any weight, as if it were nothing, and also everything. The other was a realtor's business card, crisp and white, left over from a plan that no longer had any reason to exist. I looked at both. I picked up neither. There was no hurry. That was the strangest part, the part I kept turning over. For 16 years, there had always been a hurry, a payment due, a repair needed, a favor to cover, a call to make before something slid off a cliff. Now the phone could sit. The card could sit. The house was free and clear, and so was the night, and so was the morning coming after it. Tomorrow I start living the part I kept putting off, I said. And for the first time in years, tomorrow did not frighten me. The window had gone from black to a thin, tired gray while I sat there. Snow softened the glass, blurring the streetlights on Birch Lane into soft smears. I stood slower than I once would have, and crossed to look out. Ashford lay under its white the way it had every winter I had lived here, the same roofs, the same fences, the same cold. For 9 years, this town had felt like a cell. I could not leave walls made of duty and habit and grief. I stood at the window and waited for that old locked feeling to close over me. It did not come. The town was just a town. The cold was just cold. Ashford was no longer a prison. It was only weather, and weather passes. The gray went pale, then warmed, then broke gold along the eastern roofline, and the light came up over the snow and touched my scarred hands on the sill. I breathed in, and the breath went all the way down, and the empty house settled around me, and felt at last entirely my own. And that was when I understood that this was never really a story about a house at all. Sitting in that empty house with the sunrise on my scarred hands, I finally understood the lesson. It was never about the house. It was about the years I spent buying love that was never for sale. God does not rescue the man who keeps rescuing everyone else. He waits patient as that snow until you set the weight down yourself. Let me be honest about my own story. I was no hero. I was a frightened man with a checkbook. People will call this family revenge. It wasn't. The real family revenge was what I did to myself, one silent check at a time. Don't be like me. Don't wait until 68 to learn that respect cannot be purchased. Don't confuse blood with loyalty. And when someone tells you plainly that you should stop existing, believe them the first time. My opinion, for whatever an old carpenter's opinion is worth walking away, is not dad revenge, it's dad repair. Closing your wallet and opening your own door takes more courage than any argument at a Christmas table. Some will call my peace family revenge. Some will call it dad revenge. Let them. Dad revenge never fed me, freedom did. If this story found you tonight, tell me in the comments the moment you would have walked away. Share it with someone who is still paying for love, and subscribe so the next story finds you first. A gentle warning: before we go on, the stories ahead contain fictional details written to teach rather than to accuse. If that isn't what you came for, step away kindly and choose something that serves your heart better. Thank you for staying with Bitter Antum all the way to the end.